Chair Tito Jackson to welcome and get this program started. So, Tito, please.
First, I want to thank Theo and Phoebe. These sisters punch well above even my weight. They for those who have not met me, I am very robust, and so the work that this organization does is powered by two amazing women who continue this legacy, this dream, and these bold actions of the Dunphy family forward. And we have turned that corner and made that decision that this actually goes further and beyond the family and really lifted it up. I come to this, again, my name is Tito Jackson. I'm one of the co-chairs, and I come to this as a skinny 19-year-old kid whose all of his hair was black at the time and actually could not grow facial hair when I first joined this organization. I was in New Hampshire, and I was one of 54 Black kids at the University of New Hampshire, and I was at a reception for Randall Robinson, who had just spoken at UNH, and the school was trying to get every single Black kid they could possibly find in the reception. So it looked a little bit more diverse than it was. If you don't know, University of New Hampshire is a HBCU. It is a not a historically Black college and university, is a historically blonde college and university. And so therefore, they were looking for folk, and I was pushed in, and I ended up connecting with the coolest looking dude in the room. This dude had the most beautiful head of hair that I've ever seen, and walked in dressed even more casually than I did. I had on jeans and a sweatshirt. He had on a Nike squishy suit and a roll-up bike, and it was Jerry Dunphy. I got connected with the circle. At that point, we did the Freedom Summer in '94, commemorating things, and really just got swept up in to this amazing and venerable organization. So the objective today is really to continue that intergenerational conversation and really stress the fact that all of the movements in history, and particularly in US history, have been powered by young people. We need to recall that Martin Luther King Jr. never made it to 40. Malcolm X never made it to 40. Black Lives Matter, the Arab Spring, these are movements that are powered by young people. And each generation must and has to take the baton to really earn their own freedom and ensure justice in their time that they're here. And so I leave you with two quotes. One from a woman that many of us know and I believe all of us love, Marion Wright Edelman. She said, "A lot of people are waiting for Martin Luther King Jr. or Mahatma Gandhi to come back, but they are gone. We are it. It is up to us. It is up to you." We are who we are looking for, and our young folks who have really good knees and a lot of breath in those lungs to do this work, we ask that you step forward and continue to push us and to do as young people do, which is to not want to say, hey, it's going to take a lot of time. We want you to continue to push the bar today and all of the days moving forward. And the last quote I'll leave you with is attributed to Rabbi Tarfon. It's also in some of the other books that people read. In the book I read, it's in Micah, but it really does speak about the framing of how to digest all of the difficulty that's out there, because it can be overwhelming sometimes. And so the quote goes, "Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it." And in my Jewish brothers and sisters culture, there's a component of a life's work, mitzvah. There's a thought of you're here to do something and leave it better than you found it. And I submit to you, the folks who founded this organization, who were radical in the 70s to bring Black and brown folks together to do something that was radical at that time for Black and brown people to eat in Boston together downtown. That component of radical civil dialogue is more important today than ever. And it must be led not by brothers like me who can tell when it's going to rain in my left knee because of some old football injuries, but by the youth who understand that they are naturally futurists. Their arc is going to actually extend past ours, and they are absolutely ready to receive their baton of leadership and make it bigger, better, and badder than we could ever have thought. So I thank you for the opportunity to connect with you today. I look forward to hearing from this awesome, fantastic, and amazing panel of leaders. And also I look forward to continuing to hand the baton and elevate leadership, just as Jerry Dunphy, Nadine, and the Dunphy family did for me, serving as a platform to make sure that that next generation of leadership is there. I thank the Dunphy family for the vision, and I also thank you for being visionaries who are thoughtful enough to continue to pass it on. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to connect with you, and let's continue to push forward in love and with that spirit of connectedness that we have always had. Thank you.
In that spirit of connectedness, Tito, I'm going to pick up from you. And today's circle theme is starting young and staying at it. And dearest Ethel, we love you so much for doing that. As you well know, our families have been connected since our brother Bud worked on the 1946 congressional campaign of your brother-in-law, Jack Kennedy, who announced his 1960 presidential campaign at a Dunphy hotel in New Hampshire. Jerry and his brothers Jack, Bud, Bob, and Walter proudly worked on Bobby's 1968 presidential campaign. And Bob was deeply moved to stand honor guard at Bobby's funeral in St. Patrick's Cathedral. You, Ethel, were always by Bobby's side, advancing human rights for us all. You got us and most of the world to give up California grapes in solidarity with the United Farm Workers, marching with Cesar Chavez. Kerry noticed the poster signed by him, and Dolores Huerta, who also received this award. Your daughter, Rory, captured your profound partnership with Bobby beautifully in her documentary film. We'll watch the brief trailer right now.
Why should I have to answer all these questions?
Well, we're making a documentary about you.
Because I was born 6 months after my father's death, I never had a chance to know him. I was raised by my mother, Ethel Kennedy.
So was it love at first sight?
It was.
Really?
Wow. My parents weren't bedrock Democrats, but I just totally put the Republican part behind me. The children were always included in everything we did. They could probably made them more interesting.
Any occasion that there was to have a party, there'd be a party.
She had every single member of President Kennedy's cabinet knocked into the swimming pool.
Win. That was important. Trying hard, not part of the culture.
Losing isn't any fun. No kidding.
Especially after Daddy died, we learned sports from Mommy.
While the rest of the world was grieving and the family was grieving, she saw the best in it.
Nobody gets a free ride. Everybody faces friends who have died or family.
What do you attribute your success to? I think just the effort that we made in the campaign. And Ethel.
At Built with Ferguson, we know that when it comes to your business, time is money.
Stop sharing, Fee. Great. So, Cara, you're following in the footsteps of your totally awesome grandmother. And we know how proud of you she is. So we're thrilled that you're accepting the Global Citizens Award, which Theo will show everybody, on her behalf. She joins the ranks of Nelson Mandela, Coretta Scott King. It's okay, we don't need to see it right now. And other luminaries, as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things, which is something that I think the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights and Global Citizen Circle have always done. Not just the world-renowned people, but the unknown, unsung heroes who have made tremendous efforts on behalf of social justice as we have pursued for 50 years. So I virtually pass the award on to you, and now there it is. And we'll go to Cara to say remarks on behalf of her grandma.
Thank you so much, Nadine and Jerry and the entire Dumpy family. My grandmother was so excited to hear that I was able to, one, spend time with you two recently this fall, and was recalling fond memories, and so honored to accept this award. I apologize that she said that she can't be on screen with us today, but she so believes wholeheartedly in the entire mission, in the ethos of the Global Citizen Circle, and particularly the importance of dialogue. I was laughing with her about visiting her house as a grandchild and how it's always been certainly characterized by lively dialogue and debate from people who are currently sitting in the administration to the grandchildren from 8 to 15-year-olds also at the table, who were also invited to give their thoughts on educational and homelessness policy, and what does justice really deserve, and what does justice mean, and what does God call us to, and why aren't they doing it? So anyways, thank you again, and excited to talk more about my grandmother and her legacy and our continuing of it afterwards. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so we are really blessed to have an amazing moderator today. Carol Jenkins is a trailblazer in every possible way. One of which having been one of the first African-American women anchors on a major television network. And beyond her 30 years as a journalist, she's been a leading activist on behalf of women's and civil rights. Her accolades are boundless. I turn the program over to my gorgeous, beloved friend, Carol.
Thank you so much, Nadine. And Jerry, you're adorable. I know that's not a very sophisticated word to describe you both, but you are lights of humanitarianism, friendship, keeping in touch, celebrating, and certainly the work that you're doing with this organization. So much appreciated and acknowledged. I also want to congratulate Cara and Kerry on this well-deserved honor for your mother, Ethel Kennedy, and her creation of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. I encourage everybody to watch the documentary, the full documentary, Ethel, on HBO Max by daughter Rory Kennedy. It is just wonderful. It is so moving. You will love it, and you will begin to understand so much more about the family and what they've all contributed, and certainly Ethel Kennedy's place in all of this work. Thanks so much to the Global Citizen Circle for all of these years of incredible gatherings, to Theo and Phoebe, who do the planning and logistics, as Tito has sung their praises as well. I thank them. And I'm delighted to be a part of this conversation because, we're framing this as starting young and staying at it, the relay race for justice. You talk about a relay race. In my most recent work with the ERA Coalition, we've been working on an amendment to the Constitution that would prohibit discrimination against women. We've been working on the same Equal Rights Amendment now for 100 years, a century, first introduced by Alice Paul in 1923. And I'm always amazed by the perseverance of the activists, the supporters, and the policymakers as well, to keep at it. Some of the people who I work with every day now started when they were young and are still at it. And it seems to me too that being recognized for staying with it, particularly if you're a woman, is a somewhat tricky thing. Last night, I attended the honoring of Malcolm X on the anniversary of his assassination, and we were at the Shabazz Center in Harlem, here in New York. His 6 daughters were determined that we should remember and honor their mother, Dr. Betty Shabazz, who raised them and created the center there, as did Ethel Kennedy do the same thing, in her life. So it's great that we have 3 powerful women discussion leaders to get us started. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions, but then it's up to you to engage with them. So as soon as you're ready, as you hear them saying things that intrigue you, please put your name in the chat, say you'd like to ask a question. And then shortly after we do these opening questions, we will come to you, because that's what this is all about. It's a gathering of concerned people who, are doing things already and want to learn how to continue doing it and getting the next generations to do it as well. I will start by introducing Kerry Kennedy, who is president of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. She's the proud mother of 3 daughters, Cara, Mariah, and Michaela. A human rights activist and lawyer, she authored the New York Times bestseller, Being Catholic Now, as well as Speak Truth to Power and Robert F. Kennedy, Ripples of Hope. She is the recipient of so many prestigious awards for her vast humanitarian efforts. Cara Kennedy-Cuomo is a board member of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, a current MBA candidate at the Wharton School, and previously an associate at 17 Asset Management. She's putting her business skills to work here, a global firm that designs and manages investments aligned with the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Cara has worked for Jeffrey Sachs on international development efforts, living and working in Rwanda, Malaysia, and Colombia. And for a young activist, a humanitarian, has so many things to tell you about as she begins to talk about herself and her grandmother. And Lucina Kayee is a multidisciplinary artist, a researcher, an advocate for survivors of the foster care system, and an educator. She's the founder and executive director of Atlas of Blackness. Atlas of Blackness is a grassroots multimedia artistic research-based organization, and she's going to tell us how to string those words together, artistic and research, that mentors Black foster youth by providing resources to document their untold stories, to produce authentic narratives rooted in their truth. And we know how important the idea of storytelling is, so we'll be keenly interested to hear Lucina. But we will begin first with Cara. And the question today is, what brought you to this work? Was there a moment in your own life when you realized you had to act to protect the human rights of other people? Cara.
Thank you, Carol, for that wonderful introduction of myself and my fellow panelists, who I'm honored to be here joining. Pardon me. To kind of give a bit of color between my entry into this space and my grandmother, you know, I grew up watching my grandmother and my mother work in this space, and everyone I meet organically calls Grandma Ethel a force of nature. And she is such an incredible will to her, such an incredible passion and incredible fire, incredible energy. And also to such an important point you raised, Carol, about what it means to be a woman in this space, and a woman particularly then to be in this space and to be loud and strong and demanding of advocacy, demanding of justice, to have a voice and celebrate that voice, and to be empowered and empower others to feel like they have a voice and that they better use it. And they have an obligation to use it, as Mr. Jackson shared with us earlier, was such a source of inspiration, and something I felt like I too had that same fire that was such a gift from her. And also a trait her and my mother share was balancing that in the most beautiful, confusing way with such a sense of love and deep understanding and deep call for community with the people they were, you know, working with and also working against, and calling everyone together in just mutual understanding, and that we can all do this together, and we're not on different sides. We can both be on the same side of history together. And how do we work to do that, both with that fire and empowerment and passion, and also with love and kindness and understanding, and holding those both at the same time. So they've been such sources of inspiration for me, though I would say from the youngest age, I'd have to credit my mother, who, instead of telling us bedtime stories at night, told us alternating between the Greek myths and stories of human rights defenders around the world from her book, Speak Truth to Power, on how people of any age and any place and any language and any gender can see something wrong and stand up and do something about it. And isn't that the truest hero of any fairy tale? So credit to you there, Mother.
Cara, that's wonderful. Kerry, I the same question to you, but I love your storytelling, the bedtime storytelling, and what you've created here. This is wonderful.
Yeah, well, Cara is just such an extraordinary joy. And I'm going to take that video, Cara, and show it to Mommy in a couple of hours as soon as we're through. I'm here in Hyannisport, and she's just down the street, so she'll be really happy. It's, first of all, let me say, it's so great to be with all of you. I feel like I'm home. One of the heroes of Speak Truth to Power is actually with us, Martin O'Brien. So it's so great to be with you, Martin. And one of my colleagues who's just done such incredible work on human rights, and especially most recently on mica mining in the Congo. Doro is here as well, so happy to be with everybody. You know, you mentioned Randall Robinson, and he was leading the marches, the protests against trying to get the United States and companies and cities and states to withdraw their funds from South Africa. And it reminded me of my sister Rory, the youngest in our family, has this incredible story about my mother. where she was watching Randall Robinson and heard that there was going to be a march on the White House. And Rory was about 9 years old at the time. And she thought, I want to go and do that march. And then so then she watched a little more and learned that everybody was getting arrested. So she thought, oh God, I don't know, what am I going to do? So she went to her brother, my brother, Douglas, and said, you want to go get arrested at the White House for South Africa? And Douglas said, great, yeah, I'd love to. And then, then they had to go in and ask their mother, we want to go get arrested. And Rory said she was just like beaming. Yes, let's get arrested. I'll take you to get arrested. She puts them in the car. She drives them to the White House. She drops them off there. And Rory said the police came up and put her in handcuffs and were shoving her into the police cruiser. And she looked back and she said, I've literally never seen my mother more proud of me than that moment. My entire life. And I just, oh my gosh, what a great mother she is. But I tell you another, I mean, you're asking how did what she do sort of get me engaged in human rights? One of my earliest memories is was going to the White House, going to the Justice Department at the height of the Civil Rights Movement when my dad was Attorney General, and my parents didn't separate their home life from Daddy's work at all. So there were always civil rights activists at Hickory Hill, and then we would often go over and see Daddy in his office. And one of those days, my mother, put 6 or 7 children and 2 or 3 dogs and a football into her convertible and drove us down to the Justice Department. We went up and saw my father, and he had an enormous office. And it was actually kind of a hallway, and he took over that area so he could throw a football across the office. And so we were visiting him, and then we always liked to go to watch the FBI, and there was a tunnel underneath the Justice Department over to the FBI building. And we would go and, walk through that tunnel and watch the FBI sharpshooters have practice, which we thought was very, very cool. And then in the bottom of the FBI building, there was a suggestion box. You never see those anymore, but anyway, there was a suggestion box. And so my mother went over and wrote a suggestion and put it in that box. Now, the head of the FBI at that time was J. Edgar Hoover, who was not known for his love of children or his sense of humor. And so he had said at that time that the 2 biggest threats to American democracy are Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy. And my father was a boss at the time. And so my mother, put that suggestion in. Then an astute FBI agent went and picked up the suggestion, ran it up to J. Edgar Hoover's office, who read it and then had it sent to Daddy's office. So while that was happening, my mother was gathering up the 7 children and the dogs and football and bringing us back to Daddy's. And when we opened, walked in the office door, my father was reading the note and it said, "Get a new director." So, so she just always had this, sense of humor about herself and everything in life, but also she always spoke her truth to power, no matter what. And those are really important lessons for me.
Oh my goodness. I wish I could have a snapshot of that, your mom putting that in. I'll be thinking about that for quite a while. I always love your mom and respect for, now I've got this, new thing, rumbling around there. I love it. Lucina, how did you come to this work? Very important work, by the way. I know that you're working with foster children, LGBTQ, trans children. What brought you to that work?
So I'm from a indigenous population tribe in Liberia called the Sapo people. And we're from like the mountains, like we're like mountain people, right? And so during the like the first Liberian Civil War, my family has always heavily been involved in political action. We were very anti the displacement of like American occupation of our country. And so when my grandfather was assassinated um, for being very vocal about that and protecting our land, my family at the time went into hiding. And then in the early 90s, when the Second Civil War happened, they were specifically targeting our tribe, again, because these occupation of land. And my mother, who I get all of my political like awareness from, the women in my tribe, especially my mom, she pretty much helped our family escape Liberia and escape persecution, and helped us get to Ivory Coast. From Ivory Coast, I was brought here to America. And so for me, coming to America without my mom, because again, she was not allowed entry into this country due to her political actions back in Liberia. For almost 20 years, she wasn't allowed here. So I came here with just one other person, and later ended up in foster care system. And for me, the reason why I got into this work is because while in foster care, I was incarcerated for most of my time in foster care, right? And while being incarcerated, I spent most of my time in solitary confinement and in different placements throughout that time. And while I was in my last facility, I had taught myself how to read and write while in solitary. And I had promised myself in this like little notebook that before the age of 30, I'm gonna do all these things that, for example, I'm gonna make sure that there's an organization that is centered around Black foster youth and centered around research. I'm gonna make sure that there's research out there that literally shows what's happening to foster children in the system, right? And these human rights violations that are happening to us. But I'm also gonna make sure that I am paving the way for other foster youth to dismantle the system that is continuously funding us into the prison system, right? And when I was released from my last facility and placed into my last foster home, I started working on that. It's taken me many years, but finally in 2021, after the murder of George Floyd, my organization launched it. And for me, the main focus was, how do we provide the most marginalized people within our community, right? So foster youth, who are Black. When you're dealing with a population who, like, when you're Black, you're hyper visible, right? And when you're a foster youth, you're hyper visible. You're also considered invisible, where there's not that many research done on you, but due to your invisibility and hypervisibility, you're always targeted either way, right? And so for us, and for the work that I do, I'm always thinking like, how can I make sure that the things that has happened to my family back in Liberia, the things that have happened to me and my peers in America can be known, but in a way where we're not co-opting the stories, right? Because the story of my people in Liberia looks different from the stories of the Don people or the stories of some folks in Nigeria, even though we've all dealt with displacement, but the stories of Black foster youth may be similar in the US, but our Blackness is all different. So how can I make sure that these narratives are told in a way where it's not co-opting, but it's not erasing the reality of what folks are dealing with. And so with Atlas of Blackness, my goal, and then we haven't succeeded fully in that goal, right? My goal is to make sure that we are teaching Black youth how to do intergenerational work with their elders, but then also how to tell those narratives, because in reality, our people already know how to tell stories. We're storytellers, right? But it's access to resources to disperse these stories that is difficult. And if we can provide that to people in our community, then our stories are, even through displacement, it's hard for them to erase us. And so that's what I got into this work, because of the women in my family who have always made sure that I understood that they might try to kill us, right? But they cannot erase our stories. They might try to destroy our land, but they cannot erase our stories. And even when they displace us, our stories will still stand. And if you allow them to destroy the narrative that our people have created, then you have allowed them to officially kill you. And so, and that's why for me, I'm like, I will never allow even the system that's consistently targeting me as a journalist who's here, as an organizer who's in Minnesota, they, even if in death, right? You will not officially kill me, because the narratives that I have created will always be here, and the narratives of my people will always be here. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. That is so powerful. Lucina, thank you for your work. It is absolutely much needed. You know, I saw a Facebook post from a friend of mine who had started an organization, a wonderful organization called Less Cancer, and has been assiduously working for research and for patient support, all of this really hard work, and had gone to Lansing, Michigan, where his organization was going to be honored for all of the work that he was doing. And he got there just as the massacre at the university was taking place. And so spent the night listening to the sirens and the ambulances, you know, going forward, and wrote a piece saying, you know, how really, you know, do we decide what to do? You know, how do we limit ourselves? We can only do X, Y, and Z. So the next question for you all, and Carrie, maybe we'll start with you with this, in terms of, you know, where do you think the most need is now? What, you know, where would you put your effort? And I know you are everywhere, all over the world, but in terms of what you see as the most urgent thing now that needs to be addressed? Carrie, I think you're still muted.
There we go. Sorry. You know, the nations of the world came together and they agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals, those 17 goals. And so I think we have to do everything all at once. We can't just say the most important thing is the environment, because you can't solve global warming if you still have racism against Indigenous people. And you can't solve racism against Indigenous people until you solve child labor, and you can't solve child labor while you still have women being beaten up, and you can't solve domestic violence unless you solve, you know, the racism in the justice system. So we have to do everything. We have to do everything all at once, and we can't just choose one. We just have to choose what you can do, what I can do. And then we have to have faith that our colleagues, our friends are doing, you know, are working on all the other things. So, and that together we're going to change the world. And I think the first thing to do when thinking about this is imagine what the world's going to look like. Imagine what the world will look like when all the Sustainable Development Goals are met, when there's no poverty, when global warming is no longer an issue, when women are empowered, when the financial services industry, which controls literally all the money on earth, and right now less than 2% is controlled by women and people of color. Imagine that. All the money, $120 trillion, less than 2% by people of color and women. That's insane. We have to solve all of this at once. So imagine that world, and then let's work towards the world we imagine. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, if you really pushed me, really pressed me and said, you can only change one thing, what would it be? I would say I'd get rid of hate. Because, you know, hate is Boko Haram in Nigeria. It's Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in Europe. It is basically everything that came out of Donald Trump's mouth during his presidency. It's anti-Black violence. It is suppression of farm workers because they have brown skin. It's the filling up of our jails with people of color. It's the pipeline from the foster care system to the prison system. It's what Russia is doing in Ukraine today. This is all over the world. And if we can remove hate, and then if we can replace that with love and compassion, I think we're on our way to a more just and peaceful world.
Well, well said, well said. Cara, what are you thinking about? And I know you're, getting an MBA, trying to lasso some of that money, right? The financial aspect of it, so it's spent the right way. What do you think the most important issue is?
Absolutely. I would certainly, one, be amiss to disagree with my mother. She's right in all things and much wiser than I. And I'd also like to thank Lucina for your sharing your story and highlighting that particular issue for us. And, again, also just doing the difficult work of sharing your experience and your story and the overwhelming difficulty and trauma that's part of that, and still making your experience one that benefits everyone in this room and in this world. So thank you for that. I think if I had to certainly avoid the prompt, because I'm not going to say what is the most important thing at all, because so many are so very important, but the one that I think is both important and that I have the unique ability to address is financial inclusion, and particularly rewriting some of the systems of our, capitalist-based democracy, which is incredibly important in many ways, but does do its darndest in a lot of ways to systematically exclude others. And when you look at a lot of these issues, we're talking about mass incarceration being one of them. Like, who benefits from that? And it turns out a lot of people do. So the more that you can do to unearth and rewrite those incentive systems, I think the more you can do to change the face of our democracy through the economic means which funds it. So that's kind of the what I'm up to these days, and what I think is where the events come from.
And we all are wishing you so much success in what you're attempting to do. Lucina, I have a feeling that you've got your eye and you're working on the thing that you think is the most important. But talk to us about that a little bit more, and of how perhaps we can help you in that.
So one of the things I think I'm like Cara, where I'm like, I feel like there's so many things out there. But for me, my focus has always been foster care, and I don't know how to unfocus away from that. But one of the ways I like to explain this to people, right, is to think about, when we're thinking about abolition, when we're thinking about how to reform these systems, I always want people to picture this large ocean, right? And one of the ways that things are able to survive in the ocean is because of phytoplankton, right? Without phytoplankton, because phytoplankton provides, I think, over like 80% of oxygen within the ocean, right? And without it, things tend to disintegrate and go away. So I think of phytoplankton in a way of foster care. Without the child welfare system, that ends up providing folks for the prison system, that ends up providing folks for deportation, all these other systems, right? If the child welfare system was not here today, if the child welfare system was reformed, there would be no way for these systems then to have people within prison. We also, there'll be no way for us to have a large population of unhoused people. The reason why I say that is because during 2020, during the uprising in Hennepin County, where I live in Minnesota, over 70% of people who were unhoused at that time came directly from the foster care system, right? And if you look at some other states, they show how about 70 to 80% of the people who are incarcerated or on death row come from the foster care system. So when we are thinking about incarceration, we're thinking about all these ways of how we can reform or abolish these systems. I think people need to start thinking about how can we start with foster care first, right? How can we start with the thing that allows other things to breathe? Without child welfare, these other systems that we're trying to reform or abolish would not be able to survive, because foster care in this instance is a phytoplankton of our ocean, right? It's a phytoplankton of our society. And what keeps the prison industrial industry going. It's what keeps our unhoused populations going. And my biggest thing is, like, if we figure out a way where we can either reform or even abolish this child welfare system how it is right now, and really focus on investing in families, right? Investing in because majority of the population, at least in Minnesota, that ends up in foster care is through neglect. And neglect is such a weird terminology that this system used to displace people, because foster care is a form of displacement. And one form of neglect is folks' parents being addicted to opioids. And so instead of us investing in addiction services for families, or instead of us investing in things like simple things as jackets for families, right? Food for families, there'll be less young people in foster care. And I think we tend to focus on this overall arching large issue instead of really focusing on the things that lead to that overarching large issue, right? And so the things that lead to young people end up in foster care is just the fact that our system is designed to displace families. And how can we stop the displacement of families if we're not actually investing in the communities of those families? And so my work right now is really, like I've been saying, focus on that narrative building and focus on the research and really focus on how can the foster care system change to prevent us from continuously pouring money into the prison system. Thank you.
Oh, wow, those statistics are shocking. Even though we've heard them every time we hear them again, and to realize that it is a direct pipeline, it's outrageous. Okay, well, we've got some great answers to questions and things to think about, and now it's time to open it up to you all for questions. And I understand that Elizabeth Richards from Manchester, New Hampshire is going to ask the first question. And again, when it's your turn, if you can remember to unmute yourself, identify yourself, where you're from, and an organization if it's relevant. If not, don't worry about that. But we want to hear you in the conversation. Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Carol. Lucina, hi. It's amazing to meet you and hear from you. I'm honestly getting a little bit emotional listening to you. My wife and I are foster parents, and I went into being a foster parent feeling like I was pretty well equipped in understanding social systems, understanding how complex these issues are, and nothing could have prepared me for the staggering level of dysfunction that we have encountered from the child welfare system, and the unbelievable ways that families get caught up. And so I don't have an easy question for you, but I'm very curious about your answer. If it feels, as we've been talking about, it feels a little bit daunting and overwhelming, right? When there are so there are, in this one system, is one child welfare system, right? There are so many complicated issues that are really bad for kids and really bad for families. If you had a magic wand and you could fix one or two issues, like where do we start? What is the thing that you think, like, if we could change this aspect of the system, right, it might have a ripple effect? What should I be advocating for?
So your questions is around like the young folks who are currently in the foster care system, right? Elizabeth, am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, all of it, right? The fact that we pay foster parents, but not biological, like I'm getting money to have kids in my home. I don't need money, but right? Like I'm in a place to help, so I don't need this money. But the family whose kids have been removed, they need money, right? They need all kinds of support that I don't need, and yet the support comes to me as the foster parent, not. And yet we say that the goal is reunification of families, but in my experience, foster parents are actively discouraged from working directly with biological families to maintain and build those relationships that really would foster a connection and a right long-term support system. And so when I start to think about pulling at threads, I wonder what you think about, right? You said if we could reform or abolish the child welfare system, what would be your reformation? What would you change if you could?
So first, I want to explain difficulty of care laws to folks in the audience, right? So, for example, in Minnesota, in 2014, our difficulty of care laws changed. What are difficulty of care laws? It's pretty much the way that counties and states measure the difficult ways that a child might be for a foster parent or adopt or foster parent. So in Minnesota, based off of how difficult that child is how much the foster parent would get paid. So that child is a boy, if that child is coming from an incarcerated system, you get paid more. So like, for example, my foster mom got paid a lot more money because I was undocumented, I was queer, I was Muslim, and I came from lockup, right? But when I started doing well in school, her $1,500 a month went down to $800 a month, even though she was trying to put me in sports. So that's what a lot of states still have difficulty of care laws. Minnesota no longer does, but some tribes and agency have been grandfathered in. So to answer your question, Elizabeth, I'm gonna be as transparent as possible. I don't even really know where the first place to start. I think the first place to start is having these conversations within communities. And also, like, the comment you made about I'm getting paid, but the families are not getting paid. And I want people to really understand what happens when you're in foster care in the United States. If the process of TPR, which is called termination of parental rights, starts, it's usually about 180 days depending. What ends up happening is these families have a certain amount of time to do all these activities to prove that they're worthy enough to be a parent. And these activities does not go with their work schedule. So if they're working, too bad, figure out a way to quit your job. But if you have to keep your job, too bad, you have to go to these activities, right? So what Elizabeth is saying, why isn't the money I'm getting also being invested into these families? So while we're getting paid to take care of these children, the families can also be getting paid to be able to reunify with their child. That's not the point of foster care in America. The origins of the child welfare system in America comes from Britain, the English Poor Laws. The origins of foster care has always been indentured servitude for foster children. So I want y'all to go back and look, after you're done with here, look up English Poor Laws and look up Charles Lauren Brace, right? And the orphan trains. Foster care has never been about protecting children. It has never been about bringing children back to their families. It's always been about how can we protect our system from people who are no longer productive to us, right? And so I think the first thing we would need to do is start having these conversations, right? And then start looking at where can we invest money into. And even in reality, right, abolition and reforming things is so complicated. But for me, there's organizations within your state, unless if you're in Minnesota, if you're in America, right? There's organizations within your state that are already doing this work. And the work of abolition, the work of reforming looks different in each state. I'm gonna be very honest. So for the folks who are here in Minnesota, we have my organization, Atlas of Blackness, but you also have orgs like Connections to Independence that are specifically working to not only protect these foster kids, but then also making sure while they're aging out of the system that they're not left behind, right? That they have community with them, that they have security. Because for someone like me, I really don't know how the reforming and abolition will look like in your state, because there are people already trying to do it. And so for me, I always believe like conversations first, and then where can we put money to make sure that the people who are already doing the work can continue to do the work. And yeah, sorry.
No. I mean, it's Elizabeth, thank you for the question, and Lucina for the answer. And we all have research to do after this session. But is James Jenkins still in the room?
I am.
James, great. You have a question?
I'm James Jenkins. I work at the JFK Library Foundation in Boston, and I actually just returned from being with James Meredith in Oxford this past weekend, and realized that Robert Kennedy's Day of Affirmation speech, June 6, 1966, is the same day that James Meredith was shot in his second day of the March Against Fear. And so my question is really for all of the speakers. How do you all, what is something that you found in your own life from the legacy of all of this work to overcome fear, to find courage, and move through great difficulty more focused and courageous than before?
Thank you, James, for that question. Carrie, Cara? Carrie, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting about my mom and dad. This says I have to unmute, but am I unmuted?
No, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Great. It's interesting about my mom and dad because they really, for them, the most important value was love, and then the second most important is courage. And courage, not in the sense of being fearless, because being fearless can just be sleepwalking or being a fool. But it's overcoming your own fear in order to do something for the greater good, in order to serve the community, in order to serve peace or justice. And that was really, one of my dad's really great friends said that you could wrap up his life in the words, get your boot off his neck. And I think, he spent a lot of his life trying to stop the bullies. But it was more complex than that, because it was a combination of stopping the bullies, but really, really spending time with and working to understand the struggles that people were facing, which is why he was able to, why he became such good friends with John Lewis, and why John Lewis quit his job in 1968. 5 years earlier, John Lewis viewed Daddy as the enemy, because everybody in that position had always been the enemy. But 5 years later, John Lewis quit his job in order to organize the Black community for Daddy. So I think that that's always been important. And then, for me and for my world, people say, it used to be, I'd say I work in human rights, and then people would sort of say, oh, nice to meet you, and like walk across the room. Because they think this work is just all about torture and child labor and people getting beaten up and unfairness and all that. But my experience of it is quite the opposite. I mean, imagine getting up every day and working side by side with Martin Luther King. And that's what human rights work is. It's working with the Martin Luther Kings and the Mahatma Gandhis and the Wangari Maathais and the Malalas of their countries. Every single day, these extraordinary people of outsized courage who are willing to risk their lives to speak their truth to power, one of whom is on this. I mean, Lucina is an example of this, of course, here in Uganda, and Martin O'Brien here, and Doro, who's here with us. So I just feel really, I guess, inspired each and every day of my life by people who not only speak their truth to power, but also are effective in creating change, in suing governments and winning, in getting corporations to change their policies, in freeing people from slavery, and making our world better.
Great. Cara, did you want to add anything to that before we go to the next question?
I think that was beautifully said, Mom. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Sarah.
That's great. Well, while we have the family love going along here, Charlie Clements, who has a story to share about your mother and grandmother. Charlie, are you here?
Yes, I wanted to thank you and hello to everyone. It's wonderful to be back in a circle. I want to tell a story that's probably not well known, but Herbert Anaya was the chair of the Independent Human Rights Commission in El Salvador in the midst of the civil war there. And he was murdered in his driveway in front of his wife, Myrna, and a couple of his children. And we knew we had to get Myrna out of the country quite quickly. And I thought that a great place for her might be at Hickory Hill to be with Ethel, another woman who had had her husband taken away from her violently in public. And I'm not sure how it came about. I think I contacted either Carrie or Kathleen to ask them if they could help with this. And a few days later, Myrna was having dinner at Hickory Hill with Ethel. And Myrna went on to become a Supreme Court justice in El Salvador. And I'm sure that part of her transition was that dinner, which must have been very important for her. So I just want to share that story. Thank you.
That's a wonderful story. Apologies if my Wi-Fi is fading out from time to time here. But Janet Deward-Bell, you have a question you'd like to ask? Janet, who is a dear friend.
I have many questions, but I'll ask one, and that's to Lucina. And I was listening to your remarkable narrative, and you're spending time in solitary and confinement and going in and out of these institutions. And I really would like to know, what was the spark that opened up the darkness for you to lead you to envision a future that was not based on your past, or maybe it was, and that led you to your own salvation and to work for that and that of others. And I said in the chat, you're just awesome. I can listen to you tell the stories. I'm motivated by you, by the words that you say, and by the depth of your conviction and commitment. Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much for that question. I've been staring at your scarf when you have your camera on. I'm like, I'll make a good hijab. That's such a good question. You know, I think a lot when I first started doing this work as incarcerated kid, I was like organizing other young people, right? And I really didn't know what was the spark, what was allowing me to go on to the next day, until my mom finally in 18, I had finally got to see my mom, right? I hadn't seen her in over 15 years since I was like 6.5. So I went to Australia, I got my citizenship, went to Australia, got to see her. And my mom is very blunt person. She's been a revolutionary since I was a child. That's how she grew up in those type of environments. But she's also a very happy-go-lucky person, like authentically. And her whole thing is, I've survived war, and stress is not going to be the death of me. And then here she has a child, which I'm a very stressful person all the time. And she really had to sit me down and say, if you're going to continue doing this work, you're really going to have to figure out, are you doing this to make sure that your people in your community are able to have generational sustainability, right? Stability, or are you doing this to heal your own trauma? Because while you're doing this to heal your own trauma, what you're going to end up actually doing is re-traumatizing people, because you're so focused on these points and these goals, when you're not actually focused on the health of your community and the health of yourself. And so having that conversation with my mom where she said, pull the stick out here, you know what? I really started realizing what's keeping me going. And it's because there's so much death within my community, like knowledge that I know is out there, that I know people want to hear. And I think what's keeping me going and keeping me sane, to be perfectly honest, is that my community deserves our stories to be told. My community deserves, I also deserve some form of peace before my time on this earth goes. And so for me, what keeps me going is the elders within my community. What keeps the spark in me going is the young people in my community, and realizing that the work that I do is not individual, it's not individualistic, it is really community based, right? And that on days that I'm very depressed, on days that I don't see a future in what we're doing, that I could take a step back and someone else in my community would take on the role, and then I can get my cup filled by my community members. I can get my cup filled by going to a place like Connections Independence, where I was a youth in their program, right? And I see that there is a future in what we're doing. And I think that's what keeps me going. That's literally what's my salvation, that I know that I wasn't put on this earth to endure trauma and then disappear, right? That the trauma that I have endured and the trauma of my people can be put into something useful, and that after I'm no longer here, that my people will still be able to continue this work without me. And I think that's my spark, and that's what keeps me going.
Oh, that is terrific. As we're closing out our program, Cara, I'd like to go back to you, because you are our future. You and Lucina are everything that we've been working so hard for through many, it feels like centuries, decades. And to know that you're actually here and continuing to work is just a wonderful, wonderful feeling. So if you could share with us your thoughts on, are there many more like you? I mean, do you have much company of people doing this work? And can we, be assured that the work will go on?
I once again will disagree with the prompt, which is I do not deserve to be included in that number, though I have to tell you, I work really hard every day to be worthy of that spot. And it blows my mind. I can't even tell you how much gratitude I have just sitting here now to be able to hear, from my mother, who I'm very spoiled by, and I get to hear from her all the time, but people like Lucina, and like, you are an incredible human. And I'm so lucky that I get to be in a place in this world and continuously inspired by the dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens, hundreds of young people I get to meet constantly, who are like my own personal heroes and make me really excited for every day, for everything I can do to be I don't know, just supportive and do the little things that I can to kind of champion them in the many corners of our earth in which they are fighting brick by brick, step by step, for justice. So yes, is the roundabout answer to your question.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you all so much, to Cara, to Carrie, to Lucina. Just a really truly uplifting day spent with you, knowing of your experiences and the work that you continue to do. I don't know. I guess we need to look at the hate, as Carrie says. If we're going to make our world better, then we really, really have to address it wherever it pops up, whether it's critical race theory, whether it's the pipeline, whether it is refusing to support people who are impoverished. I really can never get over the fact that in even this country, we have so many. We have 13 million children living in poverty, and the rest of the world. So there is a great deal of work to be done, as Tito said in the very beginning, quoting Marian Wright Edelman, that we're not waiting for the next Gandhi or Martin Luther King. We are all here, and we need to continue, no matter what our age or how long we've been doing it, to continue doing it to make sure we create the world that we want to see. So thank you for inviting me in, and for the great conversation, and for you all being here. Theo, I'm going to turn it back to you to close out the program.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I want to especially thank our discussion leaders, Kerry, Cara, Lucina, and Carol, for moderating. This has been really inspiring, really. And so I thank you greatly. In helping to close this circle, a couple of things. First, I want to call on Eleanor Dunphy to make a comment about one of our other past discussion leaders that you will all know. So Eleanor, do you want to join me in this closing? You're muted, Eleanor. Can you unmute? Oh, there you go.
Being number 12, I got used to being muted in the family. So it's nice to be unmuted. I'm only joshing there. But I was thinking, as we were all sharing and listening, that of President Jimmy Carter, who was a Global Citizen Circle recipient and who is now showing us in real life what the end is all about. And I'd like to just read one of the many, many beautiful thoughts. And it is that he has said, I have one life and one chance to make it count for something. My faith demands that I do whatever I can, wherever I am, whenever I can, for as long as I can, with whatever I have, to try to make a difference. So for all of us in the moments of our expected disheartening feelings, we have such incredible shoulders that we're all standing on, who are with us, as you said so beautifully, Cara, and let us do just that. And that's what I wanted to share, Theo.
Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor. That's beautiful. I think many of us are thinking about the Carters in the last week or so. Appreciate that sentiment. I want to invite all of you, as you know, when we formally conclude our programs, many people often stay on and chat a little longer. And so I'd like to welcome those of you who can to stay with us. But of course, I know everybody is very busy, and if you have to jump off, that's fine too. But again, I'm so appreciative of our discussion leaders today, but I'm also appreciative of all of you for being here and for joining this conversation. I want to also thank Phoebe Delarabidi, who has worked so hard today. She has put so many incredible resources in the chat. And I want you to all know that if you didn't get them from the chat, we will send everybody follow-up to this circle, which will include the recording and the highlights and resources from the chat. So rest assured, you don't have to copy all of that. You will be getting that in the next few days in an email from us. But again, thanks everybody. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day, whether that's the evening, afternoon. We look forward to seeing you again for our next circle. And thank you again. And stay with us if you can. But of course, we understand if you can't.
I would just like to say, for those of us who are still here together, that several people, Kerry, Lucina, Carol, Cara, and participants said that we can't find all the answers, but starting dialogues like this and continuing dialogues like this is really what makes us able to unwind and unravel where we might begin. And as Theo, you just said, you're going to be sharing resources with everybody. And that's one of the themes of what the Circle has done for almost 50 years now. In convening people, we share resources with them before we get together. We have the discussions in which and then we follow up, and we help people stay connected to each other so that we can continue to learn from each other. We can continue to support each other. We can continue to be resources for each other. And I just gratitude to all of you who spoke today, and hopes that you'll continue to keep on keeping on.
Thanks, Nadine.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to just read because we didn't read the actual wording on the award when Nadine presented it, and I'd love to just read that, especially in lieu of Charlie Clemens's comment that of bringing a leader to Hickory Hill, because it's it really is very fitting. So I'll just read what the this award, which I've just got a copy of here, what that says. These awards have been earned in the workplace, prison cells, courts, peaceful protest marches, classrooms, boardrooms, and newsrooms, around kitchen tables and in neighborhood lanes. We honor courageous and compassionate members of our global human family.